There is a judicial coup in progress in the United States, according to at least one world leader. Gavin Wax and Paulo Figueiredo join us to debate whether this judicial coup phenomenon has gone global. Also, the ongoing conflict in Syria, where Christians are under attack from the new Islamist regime there. OAN's own Pearson Sharp has original reporting and joins me for more. Plus, Trump keeps his promise to abolish the Federal Department of Education. We have someone who was in the room when the order was signed to give us all the details. And we've got the one and only legendary John Rocker, the closer for the championship Atlanta Braves. It could be a wild Friday. All next on the Matt Gaetz Show. Let's do this. We're shaking up Washington, D.C. We're breaking the fever.
You ever watch this guy on television? It's like a machine. He's great. Matt Gaetz.
The United States is facing a judicial coup. It was a simple observation, but from El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele, it rang so true it was viewed 158 million times on X. It's not the first time the Salvadorian president has pointed to the threat of rogue prosecutors and the judiciary. Here's his remarks at CPAC, February 2024.
But we have to remove corrupt judges and corrupt attorneys and prosecutors.
How prescient. Today, District Court Judge Bosberg continues to threaten the Trump administration with consequences and investigation into its decision-making on the call to send Tren de Aragua terrorists to El Salvador for incarceration. We now have a lot of Democrats out there saying they didn't get due process. I'm just wondering, how much due process does someone need who illegally entered the United States from Venezuela and has a Tren de Aragua tattoo on, indicating, like, at times, how many people they killed? Well, do we need publicly funded lawyers and judges and juries for this? It's crazy. And to all of my former colleagues in Congress who are on the Democratic side saying, oh, we have to fix this, we have to remediate the violations of this judicial order, here's what I would tell them. If you want Tren de Aragua back, I'm sure we could negotiate a deal where Nayib Bukele sends them back to your district, and you can personally take the handoff to take Tren de Aragua back in your community. Is that what your constituents want? I doubt it. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller eloquently pointed out that this is beyond the scope of any one judge's authority, and this particular judge seemed to go way over the line.
The American people said to get these terrorist gangs the hell out of our country. The president has plenary authority under the Constitution, under the Alien Enemies Act, under the INA, under core Article 2 powers to achieve that. And no district court judge who presides over just some small, like little geography of the whole country could possibly presume to have the authority to direct the expulsion of terrorists from our soil, who, by the way, are also here illegally.
Today in the Oval Office, President Trump railed against Judge Bosberg's overreaching efforts to thwart the Democratic mandate to get these violent criminals out of our country.
They're a group of thugs. They come from Venezuela. They come from the prisons of Venezuela. They're very dangerous people, but they didn't look so dangerous when the guards took care of the situation from El Salvador. And I want to thank the president. He's a friend of mine. He's done a great job. But I just can't imagine that the Democrats are taking this issue where they want to have them back. Tough people, they're bad people. We don't want them in our country. We can't let a judge say that he wants them. You know, he didn't run for president. He didn't get much more than 80 million votes. And we just can't let that happen. It'd be so bad for our country. I won on the basis of getting criminals out of our country. And a judge sitting behind a bench someplace got a nice appointment. You can't take that away from the people that are responsible. Now, in this case, Marco Rubio has a lot of big decisions to make. He's got the authority to get bad people out of our country. And you can't stop that with a judge sitting behind a bench that has no idea what goes on, who happens to be a radical left lunatic.
Make no mistake about where we are. Leftists in robes have become the last vanguard of the resistance to Trump's agenda in America. But our outlook tonight goes global. Our argument is that the judicial coup isn't a uniquely American experience. In fact, there is a global judicial coup underway against the populist rise of working, proud people everywhere. In Brazil, it's Justice Moraes who's trying to thwart democracy by pulling the passport of Brazilian Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, while trying at the same time to disqualify his father, Jair Bolsonaro, from running again for president. Bolsonaro would win the election if he is even allowed to compete. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders led the Party for Freedom. He was found guilty of inciting discrimination, whatever that is, against Moroccans during a 2014 speech. When courts are holding trials for speech crimes, something has gone tragically wrong. In Romania, Romanian courts affirmed that the European Union law takes precedent over national rulings. This assault on sovereignty is a judicial coup followed immediately by surrender to non-Romanians from Romania. In Canada, the judiciary has totally taken over the information space with broad rulings declaring that anything they don't like is hate speech or misinformation. In Poland, the European Court of Justice ruled against Poland's nationalist-led judicial reforms, forcing roadblocks and imposing all kinds of fines. Those same EU courts are trying to force Hungary to change their laws regarding transsexuals. What in the world? In Germany, courts upheld classification of the conservative AfD party as an extremist organization, which was really important because it allowed intelligence monitoring and surveillance of rival politicians by the government. Where have we seen that before as a judicial intervention, as part of a judicial coup? Then there's Italy, where courts demanded that Giorgia Meloni's government continue rescue operations in the Mediterranean for Africans and Middle Easterners who are illegally immigrating to Europe. Think about that. Judges telling you have to go out in the ocean and scoop up illegal aliens to bring them into your country. It's crazy. Here's the trend line we notice. In the aughts, right? In the early 2000s, liberalism swept across Europe and then the Americas. And then in the 2010s, there was this populist backlash to open borders and erosion of culture. We got Brexit, Orban, Trump, Meloni, Bolsonaro, Bukele. Liberals realized that these popular leaders would usher in an era of productive, positive nationalism, strong borders, strong language, strong culture, strong people. So their reaction was to seize and weaponize the judiciary globally. And the coup is ongoing, and it's up to us to stop it. Joining me now to break down this global phenomenon is the host of the Paulo Figueiredo Show, Paulo Figueiredo, also the president of New York Young Republican Club, Gavin Wax. So, Paulo, we saw President Bukele issue this viral tweet that we are seeing a judicial coup in the United States. Eduardo Bolsonaro broadened that in social media remarks, talking about how the judicial coup is also present in Brazil. Do you see commonalities where judges are servicing as a resistance to the popular will of the people?
Oh, that's for sure. There's a name for it. It's juristocracy. So instead of democracy, which is the rule of the demos, the Greek word for people, you have juristocracy, which is the judiciary ruling the country. And we've been seeing this dramatically in other countries. Israel is a great example. They tried to pass a reform for the judiciary that failed because the judiciary decided the reform was not valid. So it's a left strategy. They recognize they cannot win at the ballot box, so they rely on unelected bureaucrats, perhaps the most powerful faction of the deep state.
Wow. Would you agree with that assessment, that the judiciary is the most powerful feature of the deep state, Gavin Wax? And where have you seen that metastasize across Europe?
Oh, I would agree 100%. We're seeing it in Europe, most recently in Romania, where these constitutional court judges are invalidating candidates, invalidating elections. We've seen it in Poland, where former communists now on the bench have been imprisoning the political opposition, namely conservatives. We've seen it in Italy, where they've gone after Matteo Salvini for enforcing the law. They're doing the same now to members of the Meloni administration in Italy. We've seen it in Germany, where they've declared different parties, political groups, and politicians affiliated with the AfD to be right-wing extremists and trying to keep them out of elections and delegitimize them. This is a problem the entire Western world is facing, and it seems to be a desperate ploy by a movement in retreat. That movement is globalism. It's global leftism. They're losing at the ballot box. They're losing hearts and minds. in media, in the culture, and their last attempt to punch back effectively is to use these unelected activist judges across the Western world to slow down the reforms, to slow down the mandate, and to slow down and prevent any sort of change being enacted by the elected representatives of the people. In the United States, that is President Donald J. Trump and his administration. In Europe, it's various different populist right-wing parties. So the situation is coming to a boiling point. It's very sad, and we need to fight back against it.
And I want to talk about what that fight looks like. Paulo, we have seen Justice Moraes in Brazil take these extraordinary, illegal, and I would say aggressive efforts against Elon Musk, against Rumble, against the Bolsonaros. I believe that the only proper response from the United States to what we are seeing in Brazil is to sanction Justice Moraes, to sanction him with every tool we have, to put the diplomatic pressure on Brazil so that you don't see the subversion of democracy here in our own hemisphere. Paulo, do you believe that the United States sanctioning Justice Moraes could have an impact on a judiciary more broadly, globally, to adhere to the rule of law and not exceed their jurisdiction?
Yes, absolutely, because no other country has reached the level of judicial overreach seen in Brazil. The real ruler of Brazil today is not a president, is not a democratic president. Lula is a socialist, yes, but he was put there by the Supreme Court Justice Moraes. Moraes, as you well mentioned, is that guy that looks like a James Bond villain, the bald guy that has a beef with Elon Musk. Moraes is the one that Congress in Brazil approved printed ballot receipts 3 times, but the Supreme Court, which Moraes is a justice there, one of the most important ones, blocked the implementation. The Supreme Court opened investigations against Bolsonaro simply for questioning the electronic voting systems, and now he cannot run for office by decision of the Supreme Court. So imagine this. Sounds familiar to Americans because it almost happened here. The most a popular candidate from the conservative side cannot run for office because of the decision of a Supreme Court justice from the left. So that's the court is invalidated. A presidential pardon, for example, granted to Congressman Daniel Silveira, a right-wing congressman that was imprisoned by Moraes for criticizing him. And you have several other cases. I can do a whole show about how the Supreme Court of Brazil and other courts canceled decisions or things that Bolsonaro did as a president or advanced agendas from the left. Just to give you a simple example, the court in Brazil is going to decide next week if police actions in the very violent favelas, the slums of Brazil, are legal. They decided last year that the possession of drugs is legal, contrary to the law in Brazil. They're deciding all sorts of things. They're regulating social media because Congress decided not to pass a bill regulating social media.
Well,
Moraes
it just sounds like they've become the lawmaking entity, not a review over whether or not there is an exceeding of jurisdiction on the part of lawmakers. It's an exceeding of jurisdiction in their own right. And Gavin Wax, as I look at the world, the only place where I see it has been defeated, where the coup was suppressed, was in El Salvador, where Nayib Bukele had to get a legislature elected with overwhelming majorities to clean up the corruption in the judiciary. Is there anywhere else where you've seen an effective pushback that should be instructive to what we're seeing now in Brazil and the United States?
Well, I would certainly agree that El Salvador is one of the few, if only, examples of such a successful pushback against a runaway judiciary, this sort of judicial overreach, this judicial tyranny, if you will. I know in Israel, it almost brought the entire country prior to the October 7th attack to the brink of a massive chaos because the Netanyahu government was trying to push forward a bill that would have reformed the judiciary. They have an insane system in Israel where judges basically appoint their successors. There's zero accountability. They're constantly overturning legislative and executive decisions. But I really can't think of anywhere else. I think we need to start to set the trajectory here in the United States by having Congress act, by having Congress defund some of these jurisdictions, these districts judges, or even impeach them. We need to send a message. We need to set an example, and we need Congress to use its powers in this runaway federal judiciary. It worked for Bukele in El Salvador. He saved his country. Not only saved it, he's leading the way for it to really prosper and thrive because he got rid of this element in the government, in the administrative state, in the judiciary that was preventing the will of the people from being enacted. We need to follow that model here in the United States and across the broader Western world.
There is no question that the fate of Western civilization depends on it. Paulo Figueiredo, we've got a big, decision we're anticipating on March 25th from the Brazilian authorities regarding whether or not Bolsonaro will face charges. Is there any drama to that? Is there any sense that the court will do the right thing and wipe away these nuisances and allow democracy to proceed? Or is it your expectation that he will not be allowed to run for president and will indeed be jailed?
Well, the only hope is on the United States heavily sanctioning Moraes under the Global Magnitsky Act. That can weaken his power a little bit and give a chance of Brazilian institutions to react. There's absolutely zero hope Bolsonaro will get a fair trial. They're running as fast as they can actually to consolidate power to the point that no sanctions or no any actions from outside would undermine their authority. There's still a small window for diplomatic measures, but it's closing fast. They're working on consolidating power through imprisoning Bolsonaro, which is going to happen in the next few months, and also controlling social media and all the internet through a ruling they're going to probably decide in the next couple of months as well.
We are going to follow this closely because my working theory is that if we allow this to persist anywhere, it becomes the new touchstone for the regimes that want to deny the voters the choice in their leaders. If we allow it in Brazil, we're going to see a renewed effort from the Mark Elias crowd and the folks in the United States to stand in the way of our efforts to pick our own leaders, and you're going to see it all across Europe, and so we've got to fight it with the tools that have been laid out. Paulo Figueiredo, Gavin Wax, thanks so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.